Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming here today to get a briefing on last night's City Council meeting. It's good to have the participation that we have from our community regarding many things that were on the agenda last night, but in particular, I wanted to talk about the ordinance that we passed last night by the City Council regarding an occupational tax. I want to start by saying that the vote was not for an occupational tax. The vote was in support of home rule, and the vote was in support of local governance, and that which local voters elect citizens. They're choosing who run for council and who run for mayor to make decisions on behalf of the municipalities and various towns and cities in this state. 10 mayors who represent over 70% of the population in this state sign on in opposition of House Bill 147. That House bill would prevent any city from levying an occupational tax after February the 1st. That is a problem for a city like Montgomery, which seeks to bring in revenue to better support our first responders, to pay our policemen and our firemen and women more money that they deserve, to provide more benefits that they deserve, and to give them the equipment and the technology that they deserve in order to keep us safe. And the vote that we had last night was not one that we asked for. It was one that we were pressed into by a forced decision by a state legislator and colleagues that do not think cities and mayors and city councils know how best to respond to the needs of their citizens. That's a problem. That is legislative overreach in its purest form. It is a power grab in its worst form. And it's something that has held this state back for decades upon decades because mayors cannot do the things that they need to do in order to make decisions to keep us in line with other communities across this country, because so much has to go through our state legislature, and we cannot make those decisions on a local level. And bringing in revenue is an important part of growth for any city. And when you think about Montgomery, we are not only the state government capital, but we are the region's economic capital for all of Central Alabama. And this is the region that has hemorrhaged jobs, it has hemorrhaged population, and it has suffered from stagnation in economic growth and opportunity. And our campaign last year was one of which we spoke of bringing opportunity to this city and to this region in a way that resulted in us winning 2/3 of the vote. That was a multiracial, multicultural, multi-generational coalition that we built. And that was built because we had a message of bringing about a new Montgomery. Well, a new Montgomery is one that doesn't exist doing things in the old ways that they've been done for decades before. It means looking forward and being bold and being deliberate about how we respond to the needs of our citizens, how we invest in this community, and how we provide first-class service. And to me, that starts with public safety. It starts with our policemen and women. It starts with our firefighters. It starts with our first responders. But it also extends to our communities, to our neighborhoods, to redeveloping community centers, and to supporting programs that will help this community grow in a way that not only benefits people who live in the city, but people who work in the city, who may live elsewhere, who live in rural parts of Central Alabama. We certainly understand that. But in order to do that, we cannot compete with cities in this state or cities in other states for jobs and economic opportunities that we need to grow this economy and provide the services on the current budget. And what the City Council had been trying to do for the last few months was to hold public meetings, very transparent, to have these discussions about the needs facing our Parks and Recreation Department, facing our engineering department, facing even some of the debt service that we have. But most importantly, again, to make sure that public safety was addressed in a way that would not be reactive, but would be proactive. And instead of our state legislators coming to talk to us about solutions to address our revenue shortfall, they sideswiped us, they blindsided us with a bill without talking to myself, City Council President Charlie Jenwright, or anyone else on the City Council, because they didn't think they had to. They didn't think they needed to do that. And that's the problem. And so we were put in this position even after negotiating everything from asking them to take the bill off the calendar, the legislative calendar, so that we could have some conversations and we could look at other revenue options that may be out there that we didn't know about. And we even mentioned that we would do this at least for a year. And that's important, because I do think that had we had time, maybe we could have come up with some solutions to address these issues. And ultimately, I think we all want to do the same thing, but we have to respect the power of all of our positions. And as the Chief Executive Officer of this city, I'm responsible to the citizens of Montgomery, those who voted for me, those who didn't, and those who didn't vote at all. But we're responsible for the prosperity of this city, and that means understanding where other communities are and what they are doing. And we were not given that option. So after talking about tabling the bill for a year, we then decided to see if we could find some middle ground by reducing the fee that we were looking to levy from 1%, which is where most of the cities are, including Auburn, including Birmingham, but less than Opelika and less than Gadsden, to 0.5%. And that was met with a rejection as well. So we didn't have much option if we wanted to ever have the chance to bring in additional revenue to this city. This city operates on more than $100 million less revenue than the city of Huntsville, even though we're roughly the same size. That same city of Huntsville put in $100 million to lure the Toyota Mazda plant to its area just last year. That was city money. No state incentives included in that. We aren't in that position to do that. And we would never be in position to bring jobs of that magnitude to this region because we don't have the financial capabilities to do so. And so I want to make it clear that we didn't start this administration seeking to levy any fee or any tax. What we started this administration doing was to see how we could address the needs that we discussed throughout this campaign and how we could support all of our workers, all of our staff, and the citizens of this city and the citizens of this region. And we just believe that if we're going to be the regional capital, then we have to lead from the front. And that means making tough decisions. And that means having tough conversations. But ultimately, those are things that pay off for cities and communities that choose to do so. And so before I open it up to any questions, I just want to reiterate the fact that yesterday's vote by the City Council and my encouragement of them to support the ordinance was as much about home rule. It was as much about local governance being able to make decisions for itself without having to go through the legislative process for every issue that we have to address than it was about anything else. And the fact that House Bill 147 was presented without consultation, without any discussion with local officials, to me was disingenuous. To me, it was not done with the right motivation. It was not done in the spirit of cooperation. Only after some discussion with the House leadership was there an opportunity to talk with our state representatives who never felt like they needed to talk to anyone on the local level or anyone in city government leadership. And I think that is a problem. And I think the bigger problem is that there was no middle ground that they were seeking to meet other than absolute power over what cities and municipalities can do to bring in revenue for their citizens and to bring in revenue for their services. And that is not an effective way to run our cities. It's not an effective way to grow our state. It's not an effective way to grow our economy here. And so I just wanted to explain some of those things to you and let you know why we did what we did last night regarding the ordinance for an occupational tax. And at this time, I'll open it up for any questions that you might have.
What tactics are you going to use now that the Senate committee passed HB 147 to prevent cities from?
Has the Senate passed it?
Yeah, the Senate committee.
Okay, so it'll go to the floor of the Senate, and we will ask, all the senators to be in opposition to that bill, and we will ask our representatives, in particular the Big Ten mayors, we'll ask their delegations to be in opposition to the bill, because where this bill may be about an occupational tax, another bill may be around a lodging tax and your inability to do that. Another bill may be around any fees that you may have. This is how cities operate. This is how you get your trash picked up. This is how we pay police and firefighters. This is how we build community centers and staff them appropriately. This is how we encourage community revitalization through revenue, through funds. That doesn't just happen because we pray about it. It doesn't just happen because we wish it true. It happens because you have the resources in order to make it happen and the leadership and the will in order to do it.
Mayor, would you consider legal action to get what Montgomery needs?
Absolutely. All options are on the table. We would hope that the Senate would not pass this bill, and we would certainly hope that if the Senate did pass the bill, that maybe the governor would consider vetoing the bill, and we would certainly use all of those options and make all of those requests of the leaders that we have. And I think for us, it's very important because when we're asked to do the things that our citizens deserve, they're not asking for anything more, anything less than what 26 other cities already have. And that is revenue from people who work in those cities. And let's keep in mind, we're talking about 1%. We're talking about a penny on the dollar. So I think we have to keep that in mind, because no one who claims to care about taxes is talking about removing the taxes on groceries. No one who claims to care about taxes mentions putting a cap on sales tax. And right now we have one of the highest sales taxes in the state at 10%. Now that is a regressive form of tax if there is one. That's criminal. And so that's where we are. So we have a certain level of hypocrisy here in terms of being fine with certain taxes and fees, but not being fine with others. Or more importantly, maybe who's doing them. And maybe that comes down to what cities actually want to do things for their residents. And I think there's a problem with that when the cities generate the overwhelming amount of economic growth and prosperity in this state, that mayors have to come to a committee to figure out how best to make decisions and then deal with the legislative process and something that should be a local issue that is decided by the councilmen and women elected by those towns and those cities that have those bodies represent them on a daily basis.
Representative Chris Sells, he declined to go on camera, but I believe he's the sponsor of the bill. I just want to read a statement from him. I don't want to get your response from him. He said that his concern is the 60,000 people that live outside of Montgomery that commute here to go to work. So what is your response?
Was his concern that same way when he voted for the gas tax, which was the largest tax increase in the state of Alabama's history? I don't remember him having that same concern. So again, we pick and choose what we want to do and who we want to do it for. And maybe the question is maybe who is supporting that gas tax and maybe who's against this occupational tax. And that may tell you the rest of the story right there. But while he's worried about the 60,000 that come in, so are we. Because our firefighters have to help them out if something happens. Our first responders have to help them out when something happens. Our policemen and women have to help out those same 60,000 people that come in here. Our city engineers have to make sure the streets are smooth and everything is paid for those 60,000 people that come in here. So we're concerned about them as well. And quite frankly, if Montgomery doesn't do something different, if Montgomery doesn't keep up, those 60,000 people won't be coming to Montgomery or anywhere else because there won't be the jobs here in order to sustain them. And so everyone wants to kind of carve out their own little argument for a certain camp of people. We're looking out for everybody, because as an executive, that's what you have to do. We can't delegate like the legislature. We can't kick the can down the road or pass it on to a committee to be studied or reviewed from now to the next 5 years. We have to make decisions that are in the best interest of the people here today, and that are in the best interest of this city and this community tomorrow.
You brought up the sales tax, and just want to get some clarification. Is the 10%, is that that's for the state, correct?
That's city sales tax.
City sales.
So our sales tax in this city is 10%.
So you guys have the power to, either want to reduce it?
We could get with the county and work that out. And we would love to be able to be in a position where we could do that. The legislature could be in a position to reduce sales tax on groceries. No one wants to pass that bill. So again, it comes down to, what are the priorities here, or who are the drivers behind those priorities? And that may tell us a lot in terms of why certain issues are of importance and certain issues are not. Because I don't know of anything more important than making sure that we have enough policemen and women in this city to keep everybody safe. I don't know of a bigger priority than to make sure our firefighters have everything they need to go into a building or a house and come out safely and bring out everyone they can that's in that house. But for some reason, a legislator from a town of 4,000 people believes that he knows more about how to govern this city than myself and the 9 city councilmen and women who've been elected here. And that's the bigger problem. And I'll add an additional problem is the fact that they don't see an issue with how this impacts other cities and other municipalities and what this precedent sets in terms of what they can do to address the needs and the services of their community. And I think that presents a problem, not just for Montgomery, that presents a problem for any city and any municipality in this state.
I know you're focusing on local control, but I'm wondering, the revenue from the tax, it's going into the general fund. How will people know how it's used?
Well, they would know because it'll be allocated in our budget. We have an open budget process. It is public, and we have made no bones about our priority being public safety, and to make sure that the services for the public are second to none. Those are things we have to do in order to grow this community and to grow this region. Everyone tends to look at things from a tribal perspective, but we have to look at things for the entire collective, because we can see a lot more than maybe what some of the people on the ground can see. And regardless of what we do in Montgomery, it impacts the surrounding counties. It impacts the river region. It impacts all of central Alabama. And so they will understand where that money is going throughout our budget process. But public safety is by far the #1 priority. Our community centers and our neighborhood revitalization certainly is a part of that. Assisting with our educational goals and initiatives will be a part of that, and supporting our public schools and other areas that we would also want to address in terms of our infrastructure. So those are things that communities that are growing, communities that are attracting talent, and that are retaining that homegrown talent that they have, that's what they're already doing. They're doing those things, and that's why when people talk about growth in other cities and why we don't have that here, why we're missing out.
Mayor, if you can't get the occupational tax, have you considered other revenue measures?
Absolutely. I mean, we've looked at, various abatements that currently exist and what that might bring in. And we've looked at other areas as well. And that's what we were asking the legislature to give us more time to do before we were blindsided by this legislative bill, which would have restricted us from ever implementing it. And so our approach was not to implement an occupational tax right now. It was to stand up for local governance and for home rule. It was to reinforce our citizens' ability to have their representation do what's needed to address the issues in this community. And so had we been able to table this bill, had the legislature pulled this bill from the calendar, then we would not have gone forward with our vote last night. It was solely in their hands what the outcome would be. And that's how they designed it.
Will the occupational tax, will people who pay a business license fee be excluded from paying that tax? And How much is a business license fee?
That varies. I think there are different discussions going on about that. I know there's some bills in the legislature to even address that, which we haven't really studied as much. And so from our standpoint, what we really wanted to do was to make sure that we had the wherewithal to legally enact this ordinance as a city and let the legislature take their course as they've already started doing.
What's the next step for the tax? Where does the city go from here?
Well, I think the city goes to the legislature again to oppose the bill that's currently being deliberated by our state senate, and to let them know that not only does the mayor of Montgomery oppose this bill, but the mayor of 9 of the largest cities in the state of Alabama oppose this bill because of what it does to local authority and how it undermines our ability to bring in revenue for our cities, with which, based on our outdated constitution, we're already limited by. So we don't have a lot of options in that standpoint. So where we are right now is we would continue to take this to the legislature to see what our success is there and to try to explain our position to the state senators. And then if it passes, then we would certainly look at, certainly talking to Governor Ivey about why we would ask for her to veto the bill and to consider any other options that she might have.
Mayor, we're going to have time for one more question.
So really, you're in a holding pattern right now. You just have to wait to see what the legislature does.
No, I don't want to say we're in a holding pattern. We plan to be proactive and to really take our case, not only to the citizens that watch the news, that are in your viewing area or read your news outlets, but also to let everyone know, again, why this was done. Let them know that this was not a city priority, and let them know that we were forced into this position by the legislature threatening to take this option away from not just this city, but any other city from now until, without their approval. And I think we have to look at the state to take a look at whether or not we trust the legislature to make decisions on the local level, given where so many issues are, whether it's in our prisons, whether it's in our ALEA and our state troopers and our ability to fund various state agencies, whether it's regarding mental health or whether it's regarding education. All of those are deficiencies that, to me, state leaders really ought to be more focused on than what local leaders are doing to address their needs. And for whatever reason, maybe they want us to be handicapped by some of the same things that keep them from making decisions. But at the local level, we don't have that option. We don't have the option to push things down. Our citizens expect results, and they deserve the services that come from that. And only in our legislature can you have so many issues be going on at the state level that this would be the first bill that was taken up by the leadership in our legislature without any consultation with the mayor or the city council about alternatives or other options that may present themselves.
Mayor, Capital City Connection, how does the state respond when the federal government tries to tell them what to do?
The state usually responds by taking the federal government to court. Certainly it usually responds by not being a willing participant and usually using the argument of government that's closest to the citizens knows what's better for those citizens. But for some reason, in this case, that doesn't apply. So again, another case of being disingenuous, and another case of hypocrisy and contradicting one's own self and how this bill has been approached and what it means, again, not just for Montgomery or not just regarding an occupational tax, but what it can mean for other cities and towns and their ability to bring in revenue for themselves.